We're not asking for a utopia in any way, shape, or form. We're asking for affordable health care. And you know what? Every 4 years, we are promised that we're going to get affordable health care or universal health care or everyone's going to get school for free. Well, you know what?
If you're still listening to promises of presidents,
exactly,
that's an issue.
Exactly. Nothing has fucking changed. And you know what? Pat and Brandon, what you guys are talking about is change. Some serious change. Some huge implications on everyone's lives that could potentially make it at least manageable. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk Junkies. It is May 17th. It's a beautiful day, beautiful Sunday day here in Missouri, man. Couldn't ask for a more gorgeous day. Absolutely stunning.
It was amazing all day. I was down with every bit of it.
Yeah, but we're going to have a great podcast. I just want to give a shout out to Neha from last week. You know, she's a psychotherapist from Australia. We had her on the show last week. She was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for joining Talk Junkies. Actually emailed her again, and she said she would join Talk Junkies again, so maybe, hopefully that happens. We'll see, one way or another. But anyways, I just wanted to shout you out. Thank you very much for joining Talk Junkies. But we got fucking Pat on and Brandon on from the Truth, Money, and Freedom, baby.
Let's go.
I love how I went from all serious to all of a sudden, but this is the G.
Yes. So excited, man. Pat, what the fuck is going on, man? Welcome to Talk Junkies again. We love you, man. Thanks for joining.
You bet. Hey, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. It's been going okay. I enjoyed the day today as well. Went out there and mowed the lawn and did some weed whipping and everything. And you're right, it was a perfect day for it. So it was a blessing to have as nice a day and finally have a little break from the rain.
Brandon, what's going on, man? How's life for you?
Things are going good. This lockdown seems never ending, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, I saw something the other day that was saying that, like, during the lockdown, it was like, man, this week has been the longest year of my life. And I'm like, I felt that.
Yeah.
I felt that.
But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into some good stuff today. When we've had Pat on previous times, go back to the podcast or those previous podcasts and listen to those. They're really good podcasts. But we're going to focus on something a little bit different today, and it's the central banking system. And I think that Pat can really shed a lot of light on that and give us a lot of good information on the central banking system. Pat, where do you want to start, man?
Well, first off, I'm just going to show you guys a book real quick. And this is by G. Edward Griffin. Hopefully you guys can see it.
The Creature
from Jekyll Island. So my knowledge comes from this book, plus listening to, certain people on the internet over the years. But I wanted to start, and Brandon, by the way, is probably even more well-versed in this than I am. But I just wanted to start by saying that our central bank, we call it the Federal Reserve, is actually is born of original sin. There was a lot of corruption, shenanigans, lies, and deceit around actually creating this monster that we have now, the central bank called the Federal Reserve. But the same shenanigans were employed in many other countries to create their central banks. What kind of unifies them is that the Rothschild family actually has their fingers in all of these central banks through associated big banks in all the countries. Now, the central bank that we have called the Federal Reserve is probably going to take a lot of flack now because they're printing a lot of currency, but they also control interest rates. Monetary policy is not controlled by us, we the people. It's not controlled by the government, made up by we the people. It's literally controlled by, in our case, the Federal Reserve. The same thing is true of the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, the People's Bank of China. I mean, we can go on down the list, the European Central Bank. So therein lies the problem. When monetary policy benefits the few, they do it. They will do it to benefit the few. So what I would like to talk about tonight is how, when they actually create monetary policy, how it actually affects our lives and what would happen if we took away all those policies, if we got rid of the central banks, how it would actually improve everyone's lives everywhere in the world. In fact, if we just get rid of the Federal Reserve, it would improve life around the world because we have the world reserve currency. So I'd like to bring Brandon in now on this one, unless you guys have any questions before we get started on this.
I real quick just wanted to try to get like a very like simple terminology just for because it's a lot of jargon that I'm sure we're somewhat used to, but like, so you're saying it's like if I went to my bank and they pay me in monopoly money that they literally create, and I have to pay them back because it's a loan that they charge interest on, except the only difference is since I originally took out the loan and owe them interest, they have printed more monopoly money. So now my original loan isn't even worth as much. I took out $10,000, and my $10,000 that I now owe them $11,000 is only worth $6,000 because they made more imaginary money.
Something like that.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not as dramatic. It's a real good example would be what has happened in the last 2 months with the money printing with the Federal Reserve. We know that the Federal Reserve has printed approximately $6 trillion in the last 2 months through open bailouts that we've talked about and then backdoor bailouts through the repo market. So together that's $6 trillion. What we've done. Go ahead, Brandon. Come on in.
Well, it depends on how you look at money and how it is measured. There's a few different measurements of money. There's M0, M1, M2, and M3. And on M, I think it's 2 or 3, that's where a lot of the money
Brandon, I'm sorry for interrupting you. If we're going to bring up M0, 1, and 2, could you please describe what each of them are? Because a lot of folks won't even know that.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, I don't know it either.
I was just about to get into that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
M0 is just the printed physical currency. M1 is not including all of the printed physical currency, only the stuff that's outside of the banks. And then it includes everyone's balance on their checking accounts. It includes everyone's outstanding balance on credit cards, if I'm not mistaken. And you add all of that together and you get M1. And the reason why that's important is because when you go into debt, you're actually creating money, because the banks don't have enough money to back up all of the money that people borrow. So money comes into existence in the form of debt that has to be paid back with interest. So you end up with a system that the only way that you can really get ahead, instead of one person taking their savings and loaning it to you and you pay it back to that person with interest, the bank just makes the money up that doesn't exist, loans it to you, and you have to pay back money that was generated out of thin air that other people believe that they own, that they, it's why they call it fractional reserve banking. It plays into central banking, and it's also why if we get rid of this system, we won't have so many problems in the world.
Gotcha.
I never thought about it that way. I never thought about it that way, but that makes sense about the fact that actually going into debt and having interest is creating money that isn't there to begin with. Like if you just spread out $100 and somebody borrows $1 of it, but then owes 25 cents, that 25 cents is not from the original 100. It has to be coming from somewhere to be able to come in. That's weird. I've never thought about it that way. That's very interesting.
Yep, that's something that I think that is something that I think should be taught in schools. They create the principle. They actually produce it. They print it on paper. That's not true with the interest. The interest will be borrowed in principal next year. That's where they'll get the interest from, is from the principal that they create next year. They never print the interest. Never.
And don't they need that in order to keep their system going with what it is now? Because if that's not, like, that's literally their lifeblood, is almost what it sounds like.
Right.
Is that what keeps this continuous thing going with them? Is that?
Yes, it does. Interest, it not only keeps it going, but it also creates inflation because they do have to print the interest the next year. So you might ask, when we were on a gold standard, which ended in 1971, how did we get around this? Well, on a true gold standard, you're constantly excavating gold from the crust of the earth, and that there is your inflation of the monetary supply, is the gold that you dig up. So there's energy, manpower, equipment, and it's actually got value because of all these things that go into it, particularly labor. So it actually has value. So even the interest, is created by literally man hours. So that was a more honest system than we have now. Now they literally just borrow extra money every year to make sure there's enough new currency in the system to pay the interest from last year's bills, last year's debts. So that's the way they actually do it now. So it is a flawed system. It's actually, I mean, let me just say straight out, it's an immoral system. This is totally immoral. Is charging interest immoral? Well, some people, there's an argument either way for it. I'm not going to say either way. You know, in my personal opinion, is actually when you're lending money, real money, there's risk, and there should be a reward for that risk. So that there, we would call that interest. But what I would like to do is actually take this and turn it into a positive, and let's talk about what would happen to industries or institutions if we just got rid of the Federal Reserve and started our own money system that, hopefully that's not controlled by government. If it is, government has the ability to print its own currency if it wants to mint its own money. We do it through the U.S. Mint. It's our change, our coins. The Federal Reserve has nothing to do with that. So our coins are, some people will call it constitutional money. The Federal Reserve notes are Federal Reserve notes. So coins are constitutional money, and then the bills are Federal Reserve notes. But so I'm just saying that we do have the ability to mint our own money here. But what I would like to do is say, let's make believe we have a world where the Federal Reserve just disappeared. And I'm not saying got absorbed into the Treasury. I'm saying it just went away. And what systems it affects? It affects everything. The things that you wouldn't even think about, it affects. Having a Federal Reserve that prints money out of nothing has a negative impact on everything. The only beneficiaries are the top 1%. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I have a whole list of things that would improve immediately if we were to get rid of a central bank. Once you get rid of it and the credit expansion stops, because the entire economy is built on the continual creation of new money through debt. So you would have a period of readjustment, a recession. But after the recession or depression was over, after the economy readjusts to the fact that money can no longer be printed endlessly for the purpose of, pulling resources in directions that naturally wouldn't happen if money, or I should say currency, couldn't just be printed out of thin air. For instance, there's a website called WTF Happened in 1971. It gives you a list of charts of everything that has gone wrong since 1971 when we went off the gold standard. However, you can very easily turn that into a list of positives if you got rid of the central bank. Number one, we've had a massive decoupling of wages and productivity, because you have a whole class of people who aren't working who can just make money out of nothing to buy things without working for it. So your wages would go up, or at least the buying power from the money you earn from your job would go up dramatically. After 1971, you could see inflation, or CPI, which is just a measurement, just as a number you get, and you take a price and you take this number and you take that price and you divide it by the number for whatever year it is, and it tells you how much that would have been worth back in 1913. And it went up vertical. It was just straight up immediately after we turned into a fiat monetary system. We were having over 14% inflation in some years. As a matter of fact, we have 10% inflation per year now. Peter Schiff did something very interesting on this. He bought a bunch of magazines and newspapers from 2003, bought the same ones in 2013, and measured the inflation from those years to the other years. He expected to find 30% inflation, which is what the government said we had, 30%. He found that prices had increased 130% in that 10-year span. Anyone who has gone to the doctor recently or has gone to college knows exactly what I mean. It costs an arm and a leg to go to the emergency room. You go to the emergency room without insurance, and you have to file bankruptcy. You go to college, and it is just outrageously expensive. You hear these stories of these kids that are $150,000 in debt. It's because they can get in debt to go to college. You know, they can just borrow endless streams of money from the government to go to college, and they bid up the prices to the point where go to college to get a degree costs more than a house. I had people in my family that went to school before this had happened, and they worked a part-time job, and that part-time job was enough to fund their apartment for, the school for the entire year, just the part-time job, and pay for college.
This was probably in the 80s still too, right? Like I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is probably like I don't know what time frame you're saying, but I've heard similar stories even in the 80s, which the 80s weren't too far gone from now. I don't know what generation you were talking about, but it's gotten really bad really quick. So the 80s are not too far away from us, and I'm pretty sure people were still able to work that part-time job in the 80s, go to college, pay for it, and then make their place in life.
That is correct. Jesse, I think I told you before, I'm 48 years old. That is correct. In the 80s, people literally could pay off college as they went. In fact, when I had an opportunity to go to college at the University of Minnesota Duluth, it was $5,000 a year to go. And that was in 1990. So you are correct. However, Brandon, let's talk about some of the positives here if we got rid of the central bank. The negatives are, I'm saying not just, how much cheaper it'd be to go to college, but the fact that they wouldn't be offering crap courses, stupid courses that can never get you a job. Those would disappear. The malinvestment in colleges or education would disappear, wouldn't they?
Are you trying to discredit my underwater basket weaving degree?
I am. I'm sorry you got a degree in that, but at least it wasn't gender
I really
studies,
thought it was going to... I know. I really thought it was going to pull me ahead in life.
All I have to say
is really paid off.
What's up, Brandon?
When it comes to, college or whatever, and if you've ever seen one of these college graduations and you see all these kids walking off the stage and you see environmental studies, gender studies, it's sad that the joke degree sociology is the one you actually hope to hear, because everybody's walking out with environmental studies and gender studies, stuff that is even worse than useless. There's not going to be jobs out there whose sole focus is there's more than two genders. How many jobs out there are going to be for this? Maybe some really creative writing ones, but how many of those are there?
You might find a couple of. You might find like two marketing jobs for that.
I come from a family that it's like, if you go to college, please just don't major in philosophy, because they're like, you're wasting your time. But I really enjoy philosophy. I think philosophy is very important, and I think it should be a subject that should be studied. But you can't do anything with philosophy, and you're talking about a whole nother tier of wasting your fucking time, basically. Within those,
it's kind of like taking Greek mythology, isn't it? It's fascinating. It's interesting. And it's got kernels of everything having to do with our culture, even here in the West. Mm-hmm. But it's a useless degree. It's just useless unless you're going to teach it. So
that's what it is.
Sorry, Brandon.
Yeah, if you go to school for philosophy, you have to teach it. That's the only way you make money off of it. But yeah.
Yep. Okay, but
there's
Brandon, the malinvestment part. You talked earlier, Brandon, about how basically when you can print money ad nauseum, what you do is you introduce into the financial sector of that nation malinvestment. Lots of it, in fact. Money going places that should not be going to. And one of those is colleges, because you have these classes, these stupid, I'm sorry, I don't want to say stupid, but they're simply not important. They're not going to get you ahead in life. There's really nothing you can do with them. And I theorize that if we got rid of this creature from Jekyll Island, there'd be a lot less of that. Kids going to school would actually be learning something that they need to get ahead in life, as opposed to learning this nonsense stuff, coming out with a degree in, gender studies, and then wondering why they can't get a job anywhere.
Well, I have one for you. It's not so much that it's all this endless money printing. It's that how the money gets created. If this were a system where it was the banks that got to decide, what degrees and how long and how much interest you were going to pay, for a gender studies degree, they would charge you a fortune. They might give you a rate of 30% per year just because of how useless it is, and the only skill you can learn there is how to destroy a company. But when the government does it, they just charge a flat rate of interest for everything. So it doesn't matter if you go into engineering or gender studies or environmental studies, you pay the same interest. Even though one degree adds value and can be paid back, and the other one subtracts value and can never be paid back.
And that's another thing too.
Yep,
I was thinking about how many degrees you get where the only thing you could do is get a government job or be a teacher. Because, there's just no practical application for, as much as I love astronomy. Most astronomers are working for governments, that's another one. But we need astronomers, and at the same time, I get that. But that's another degree where you basically is not one that the average person could use in real life to actually make money.
I was going to say, adding on to the classes thing, I wanted to play devil's advocate here real quick, and I agree wholeheartedly with the degrees aspect and what that actually brings you to the table in your real life as far as the economy goes and the work situation, where it's like, hey, you need to work to make money, you use that money to buy products, that's how the economy works. It's a continuous circle. I will say that, like I said, playing devil's advocate, as far as actual individual classes go, I believe there's nothing wrong with learning about anything that you can. Like, should you take a gender studies course if it's reasonably priced? Why not? Same with astronomy. Same with underwater basket weaving. If you can afford it, it's not ridiculously overpriced because of loans and all this other absurd nonsense that we're talking about right now. There's nothing wrong with you taking that course and learning about something you don't know about. Should you get your degree in that, and should you base your life on that, unless you're part of that 0.0002% of the population that it comes in handy for? No. You shouldn't. 50% of the degree shouldn't be philosophy if only 0.01% of the work is philosophy. But you should still be allowed to take classes in that, and that should always still exist, because knowledge is something that everybody should be able to gain.
I think it is a little bit what you're getting into, maybe what people should just have as a hobby and then look at as far as a career. Because a career is what drives an economy, and then hobbies are more just for fun and you're interested in it. And hobbies aren't necessarily always careers.
Yeah, what I'm saying is you shouldn't remove my underwater basket weaving class because it's useless. I would like to learn about underwater basket weaving and popcorn making because those things interest me, so I want to take those classes. Should I get a degree in that? Should a degree even exist for that? Probably not. You should take more relevant and more important classes to get the correct degree for what comes in handy in the workforce. But there should always be those options. In my mind, in my opinion, that is the point of secondary education in general, is to learn about anything you can.
Sure.
No, I agree with you on that. The thing is, if you were the one that had the money, let's just say you had saved up over your lifetime $150,000, would you lend it to the engineering student, or would you lend it to the gender studies student?
Oh, 100%
The first thing you would factor in is, go on.
No,
I was
that's
just agreeing.
Great, that's
continue.
a great way to put it, Brandon. I love that. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Because even if you've never been to a casino before, you know that there's a better place to put your money. That's pretty basic.
But if you had an infinite supply of money that you could just draw upon and loan to people, you wouldn't care who you lent it to, because if they don't pay it back, you don't care, because it doesn't have to get paid back, because you can just make more. And that is where the problem takes place.
That's the inherent problem, right? That's the issue.
Yeah, but it's kind of like a metaphor for the entire country. You look down the list of loans of all the least risky bets, and you go down to the most risky ones. If you have a fractional reserve banking system, you can go further down the more risky loans. If you have a central banking system and a fractional reserve system, you can go from the top of the list to the bottom of the list, and no matter how many people apply, you can accept everybody. That is the inherent problem, because at that point, currency is infinite, but the resources are finite, and it just pulls the resources, which pushes the prices up, which will have no meaning, because it's not the price that you're willing to pay. It's what dumb thing is the central bank willing to print money for. And what that dumb thing is whatever the government says. For instance, it wouldn't be a good idea to tax tobacco and then subsidize it. But that's what we do. It's not a good idea to, print all of this money for all of these things we really don't need. You guys are probably Christian, I don't know, but there's this thing in the Bible about materialism. And one of the things that creates materialism is the inherent fact that your money is worthless. You can't save to invest it either in your children's future or anything else if it's going to lose value. I bet you know that at least you've heard this once in your life before. I would rather not save, because if I do, it's going to be worth less next year. So I'd rather spend it now for the 5% of enjoyment that it might bring me.
Do you think without the system that we have now that America would be shaped in a different way? I mean, obviously, since 1971, when we jumped off of the gold standard, we had the Industrial Revolution, and then you see the spark in these massive major cities and stuff like that. I mean, what difference would it have made?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
I have a whole list of interesting statistics here. From the Industrial Revolution from the 1800s, when we were without the brief period when we were without central banks, or I should say between them, since we've had 4 in America, and they've all failed, and this one's in the process of failing. In between that little brief period of time, in 1890, your average person in the United States lived on $2 a day. By about 1910 or about 1920, we went from living on $2 a day to living on well over 100, or what was it, 100 or $50 a day? I can't remember the exact statistic. But we had the greatest jump in the quality of life that had ever been seen before in all of human history. We were one of the first countries where we became so productive, children nearly left the workforce. Before, everybody in the family had to be working so the whole family unit wouldn't die off. We became so productive in the United States, children could leave the workforce to get educated. We then became so productive, only one parent had to work. And then as time went on, we were still so productive, and we started going even further, that every decade, the one working parent, usually, was having to work less and less to support their entire family. And then in 1971, we went off the gold standard, and the trend started to reverse. It was no longer one parent had to work to support the whole household. It became that they had to start working more and more. Then both parents started having to work. The second one had to work a little bit. And now it's not uncommon to see married couples where they are both working full-time jobs. Sometimes they're each working a full-time job and a part-time job, and they still can't make ends meet.
So they're taking away
taxes.
They're taking away the family aspect. They're making us work more, and they're wanting us to get degrees in bullshit things.
Brandon's just talking about whenever it peaked, and now it's at this regression to where you're just going to end up this get worse.
Right.
It's not going to get better.
No, I get it.
It will get worse. And I don't want to backtrack too much, but I wanted to say something before Paul's question got asked. Whenever you were talking about saving, I don't ever want to think. This is my personal opinion. I don't ever want to have somebody be turned off to the idea of saving. It's just in how they save their money and how they use their money. I don't think anybody should think, oh man, things are just so fucked right now. there's no way for me to get ahead. So, and it's this dismal thing. This is still a winning scenario that we're in. And I think you can still be smart with your money. And even though we'll never be 1%, that's all families. That's all families that are, so don't ever expect to be a 1% percentile individual whenever it comes to money. But you can still, don't be down, oh, I'm in debt, so I'm going to be in debt for the rest of my life. There's ways out of that still. There is still some glimmer of capitalism left, even though I think it's dying too. I think I agree. I think it's regressing horribly, but I think there is some there is still some things you can do with money that
you can still achieve
yes.
it. It's just way harder than it used to be.
And I don't think even Brandon was going down that road with, because you were referencing the Bible at that time, and I wish we could have stuck on that a little bit more. But I don't want to have it be so morbid to where, oh man, there's no way out of this. I'm working 2 full-time jobs. My wife's working a full-time job. We have a kid. We can't get ahead. We're constantly in debt. There is still some things that you can do in my opinion. But for now, I'm not saying that it might get really, really shitty in over the next decade, 2 decades, whatever. But right now, I still think that there is some ways to better your life a little bit through finance too, even though obviously the core of it needs to be changed. But I just didn't want to leave it.
Oh yes.
And I think that conversation probably would have naturally got there, but I just had to bring that up because that seems very dismal to people who are in debt and.
Yeah, I would very much like to echo something here real quick. Very important, and I don't want to veer too much from our topic here, but Jesse, you were 100% right. It's called escaping the valuation channels. It's learning how to invest your money in undervalued assets. That's something Mike Maloney teaches. Go ahead, Conjecture.
And that is related to what I'm about to say. It's that when you have a system where your money is being constantly devalued through this system, it's not that you can't save. It's that to save, you must become a speculator. We have 401ks because if we hold dollars, we're going to lose. Because the dollar today is worth 4 cents, relatively speaking.
It's a joke in a money market account. It's a joke. Like if you look at the numbers from a bank and a money market account, it's a joke. If you just save money in a savings account, it's a joke. They're just taking money from you, is all it is. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we shouldn't have to be forced to become speculators in order to save money. The average person isn't suited to become a speculator. If we had, honest money, we could stuff it into a bank, and then the money would be loaned out relative to the demand to borrow it, and the money would be used to create, to expand and grow the economy, rather than it just being printed endlessly to pursue just this. I'm not even sure how to describe it. It is wholly immoral that money can just be created to just be pledged to give to certain individuals to make them have things.
It's called picking the winners. And when you have a central bank that can print money out of nothing, they get to pick all the winners. They also get to pick the losers, by the way. So that's the kind of system we have today. I agree with you, Brandon. A wholly immoral system. I've got one for you guys. If the Federal Reserve is going to just print money, literally print money out of nothing, and then give it to their friends or the organizations, the institutions, the businesses that they choose, and leave the others without any money whatsoever, then I submit that we shouldn't have to pay taxes anymore. Why not they just print money and pay our taxes for us? That's how ridiculous this is getting now. I think we as a culture need to decide whether or not we're going to put up with this endless money printing, that the destruction of the dollar is what we're seeing right now. Now, I know we're going back to the dark side of things, but if we had a real money system, this could never happen. If we were on a gold standard where it was audited frequently, that was the problem we had with the gold standard before, is that the federal government wouldn't allow audits of the gold. The last audit we had of gold was 1953. We went off the gold standard in 1971. To this day, the gold has not been audited since 1953. Steve Mnuchin went in there in 2017 and simply tweeted, no pictures were taken, by the way, there's no recordings. He simply tweeted, "Gold is safe." That's it. He's the first person to actually see the gold supply from, and he's not even elected representative. He's appointed. He's Treasury Secretary. So, the president, senators, representatives can't get in and see our gold supply. I don't know if you guys knew that. That happens to be a fact.
That baffles my mind.
I don't know. I trust anything on Twitter.
No, it boggles my mind. That makes no sense. That makes no sense at all. It's so frustrating.
Is there enough gold for 6 billion people, or how would that work if we were to implement this new system and we went, or not even a new system, but we went back to the gold standard with the population that it is today? Would it survive, or would it be something that could still exist?
Paul, that was a really cool question. Thank you for asking that, because actually that is the most confusing thing, I think, for most people, saying there's simply not enough gold. We don't have enough gold for everyone in the world to have money.
Prices adjust.
Yes, we do.
Stuff changes.
But the price will have to go up. Price of gold will have to go up to about $50,000 an ounce. And then to answer your question, yes, we can have gold as money. So we can use silver, we can use gold. They've historically been money in the past. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that was it. That was saying that prices will have to adjust. It's
Correct.
similar to what, and I'm using it in a different way, but it's similar to what Brandon said earlier about if you were to make this drastic change, all of a sudden there will be years of not regression. What's the word I'm looking
Recession.
for? Recession or a depression or something like that as people adjust to it. It's the same thing I've said with, completely digressing here, but the same thing I've said in the past with, if you're to completely get rid of the IRS and property tax and income tax and only do flat rate sales tax for everybody, so that billionaires and people who make $10,000 a year are all paying the same 30% in sales tax, there's a huge adjustment there. There's a massive, you're changing everything. You're changing the way everything works, but eventually prices will adjust, everything will fluctuate and level out to where it needs to be. Any system can work with enough time implemented. And I think the same thing with gold.
I submit to you that if we had a real money system, the government would be 25 to 10% of its current size. There is no way we could support this large government unless we had a fiat-based, print as you go money system, currency based on nothing. That's the only way you can do it.
When does the bubble burst?
When if I?
Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, I was going to say the problem with this system here and government growing is that under George W. Bush, that was about the largest our government could get, and the system to still be somewhat sustainable. He doubled the debt over his presidency, but he doubled it as, with inflation. So GDP doubled and debt doubled at the same time. They went up at the same rate, so that debt to GDP remained the same. So the amount of stuff, or the productivity of our economy, matched the debt. After the 2008 recession, government exploded further in size and is now unsustainably large. Debt doubled again, but it doubled so quickly the second time that the economy didn't grow to match the new level of debt. So we are, I'm going to have to leave you with this one, Patrick, but you understand what I'm getting at. I'm sorry.
I do, but I want to go back to Jesse here. Jesse wanted to talk about the bubble that's been blown up by the Federal Reserve. And,
when does it burst? When does it? Because that's what we're talking about right now.
That's what we're all looking for.
This is a bubble.
Okay.
And whenever, like, if you were to break that down for an individual, and you're going to tell somebody that really doesn't know too much about it in their whole life, that they've been used to the Federal Reserve and how money works, and they had student loans and all this, and you were to tell them that there will be, whenever we change, there's going to be a recession, and that's going to scare the shit out of them, and they're probably going to go, no, I don't want that. But we are getting to something that's so bad because this is a bubble that's going to burst, and when the whole thing actually bursts, it's going to be really fucking bad. Like, really bad. Because, man, I didn't want to get into this too soon, because I think some political and how people are controlled has to match this in order to keep people in check a little bit. But and I didn't even want to get into this just yet. I really wanted to hold off later on. But I think the government almost has to match with same tenacity as how they're using money against us, and they need to suppress us in other ways just to keep us under control. But whenever it bursts, it's gonna be really bad. So you want something that's gonna be a little bit bad for maybe a couple years, and then we'll come back through, or it's gonna be really, really bad maybe 30 years from now, or whenever it is. And my one question is, when do you think the bubble is going to burst? Because it will. It has to. Given any logical mind that's sitting back and like-minded individuals like looking at this at the way that we're looking at it, we're like, this is going to burst. It's going to be bad.
Pat, before you hit into that, I don't think that there's really anyone who knows a time frame, give or take. But I think it all starts with what just happened recently. And Pat, we've talked about it in multiple podcasts. But I mean, now recently they're talking about negative interest rates. I think it starts there, doesn't it?
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you, to the best of my knowledge, a really good, well-defined answer. And that is, we expected a burst, like a bubble popping, like a giant balloon that was overfilled with hot air bursting. And what we got was, for instance, a massive ship or tanker on the ocean, and a massive, force hit it and put a massive hole in it, and it's starting to go under. But what they're doing is they're treading water just a little bit slower than it's taking it on.
By printing money.
That's correct, by printing money. Once again, it comes full circle back to the central bank. So the central bank is trying desperately to keep the dollar alive. That's their product. If your job is selling widgets and suddenly widgets aren't selling anymore, but that's your job and that's your company, that's your livelihood, and you're representing the most powerful people in the world, the Rothschilds, you're going to try and keep your product alive by making it cheaper. You're going to make more widgets and you're going to make them even cheaper. You're going to try and get everyone to buy widgets no matter what country they're in. That's exactly what they're doing with the dollar. Now, when did this man the hull of this ship and actually start the taking of water? And that is in September with the repo market. Now people can argue, and intelligent people can actually argue very well, this happened in 2008. And I would agree. But to simplify things, this round started in September of 2019, when the repo market started offering up $250, $300 billion loans overnight to banks. And now there's a misrepresentation of what they were doing. They were saying, well, they need operating cost money. They need money to cover loans. They need money for this. They need money for that. So they just need to borrow it overnight. And they'll use U.S. Treasuries as collateral, the safest investment in the world. Anyone will tell you this in the financial industry, mainstream, that is. That's not what they were doing. They're selling their toxic assets, all these derivative products, all these worthless paper products that have absolutely no value, and they are selling them like crazy to the Federal Reserve right now to try and keep the derivative market from crashing. That's the bubble they don't want to pop. Bonds and derivatives. They could give a rat's butt about the stock market. Trust me, Trump loves the stock market. He wants to keep it float. He wants to keep it up there. But the Federal Reserve is ready and willing to let go of the stock market to save the bond market, because the bond market is their product. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, we did do this talking about what the positive notes with all of this would be.
Yes.
And there is a lot of positive notes, because what I've told you, those are the trends as they were able to keep the system going and, in these giant expansions by printing money. Well, the good news is there are times where you can make enormous sums of money and do quite well during these recessions. As you know, the recessions, it's taking your medicine. It doesn't taste good. It could be quite awful, but it does need to happen. The economy is sick, and a recession is the cure. As horrible as the recession may seem, that's when things start to come back into reality. Houses, they're in a bubble. They're completely unaffordable. You have to work 30 years just to afford a house. The traditional metric for how much a house should cost is about 3 times your average income for the year. So if you make $100,000 a year, you shouldn't pay more than $300,000 for a home. You go to California, your average person makes about $150,000 a year, and the homes are over $1 million. That's completely out of balance. And during this recession, we will see things starting to come back into reality. Endless money printing can no longer keep an unsustainable trend going.
I've never heard it put that way with the whole recession and medicine, and it's the economy kind of healing itself. And I mean, that's such an accurate description. I'm thinking after 2008 and all these different, and I mean, that's the only one that I really know because I was 18 at the time, and the ones that happened before that I was way too young to know anything about. So that's the only one I have for as far as like a frame of reference. But I've never heard it put that way before. And that's like a very accurate description of what a recession does and why some people do so well during a recession because they take advantage of it. And not in a bad way. I don't mean like an evil form of advantage. I mean playing it smart.
Me personally being so young, I'm 29. I don't feel very young, but a lot of people will consider me being young at 29. There's even been times after the whole COVID thing, as far as stocks that I've been looking at, that I think are at great value right now. That I don't know if Pat, you or Brandon frown upon this, but I personally invest into the stock market, and there is some stuff at value to where but I realize at my level, like my whatever $500 investment isn't nearly what somebody else could absorb, with
billions of dollars.
so much excess cash, which is way different. But
hang on, I think that what you're doing is okay. I wouldn't frown upon it. I certainly wouldn't chastise you for it. What I'm worried about is those who are literally on the precipice of retirement and they have 150, 200, 250, $1 million in the stock market. These people are at hardcore risk of losing everything and not being able to retire. That's what I worry about. Me personally, I won't go into the stock market. I'm all in on gold and silver, and I have a little bit of crypto. That's where I'm at. Now, everyone, is going to make different choices. And by the way, if I were to have most of it in gold and silver and speculate some in the stock market, I would still be okay. So a $500 sum, from someone your age, where your marketability is much higher of that for a yearly wage, relative to what you would make, let's say $40,000, $50,000 a year. I think that's fine as a speculative bet. I just worry about people with their 401ks and their IRAs that don't understand the risk that's involved in the stock market right now, with having their entire lives savings tucked in there and being told it's safe.
I've seen this firsthand with an individual that I'm friends with who is coming up to his retirement, and to hear the amount of money that he lost within a month that's a knife. That's a knife in the gut. Yeah. And it's hard for me to I sympathize. I'm like, man, that's so rough. That's so unbelievably rough. Because we would, if you're any kind of empathetic human being, you're like, man, that could be me. Especially if, like me, I started investing in the stock market like a year and a half ago. And I'm like, and this is, I don't have a 401k with the company that I'm with. I'm like, this is my livelihood that I'm getting into. So, man, that's got to be, so I try to sympathize or empathize with him. That's got to be unbelievably difficult. He's like, man, I don't know if I can deal with another one. He was like, after this whole thing recovers, but if something else happens again before he pulls his money out, basically, that, man, he's fucked,
so
basically.
What kind of system have we been like brought into? The fact that you're like, yeah, man, this is my livelihood. This is where I'm going to make my retirement. But then what if you're put in those same shoes, Jesse, this stock market that you so beloved and you love, and you're like, yeah, man, I'm all about this. And then 30 years down the road, you're about to retire, and then the same shit happens.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Me being empathetic. Like I get it. What
are the odds that we actually even get rid of the Federal Reserve? I mean, do you guys have anything to shed light on that. Are we taking any steps closer to getting closer to the end of this? Do you see signs of that?
Okay, I'm going to start, if you don't mind, Brandon. At Truth, Money, and Freedom, we predicted the end of the Federal Reserve 4 years ago when Trump was campaigning for president. And it's not, as you would think, the Federal Reserve go away and the United States print its own currency. We see the Federal Reserve being absorbed by the United States Treasury because the Rothschilds simply won't give that up. They have control of the world's monetary supply. You know, they're not going to give it up lightly. They would rather have a nuclear war than give up that kind of power. And central banks give them the ability to do that because of printing money out of nothing. You can have wars with that. If every country in the world, their currency was based on gold or silver, they wouldn't be able to afford these endless wars. They simply couldn't afford it. They would spend all their gold and silver away, and then their country would be broke. It's that simple. So to answer your question more directly, I don't see the Federal Reserve actually ending. I see it being absorbed into the Treasury. And that's not necessarily a good thing. It could be good for a little while. But what really matters is that we have a currency that's actually based on something, that we actually have a currency that has value somehow. Right now, the only thing that gives the dollar value is the fact that we're paying taxes with it. That's it. People say, well, they need it for oil trade. People are using all kinds of currency for trading oil now. They're using yuan for oil trade, euro for oil trade. They're using carry trade, so they're using Japanese yen and bonds. They're using all kinds of stuff. That's why right now we're in a divorce proceeding with Saudi Arabia. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to that. We're pulling out our political and our military support from Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is taking other currencies now for oil. And that was the deal we had with them when OPEC was formed under Henry Kissinger during the Nixon administration. You guys, we will defend and protect you. We'll keep that's my wife and my dog Checkers.
I had to.
I'm not a criminal. We are temporarily.
Anytime I hear Nixon, I have to do that. Sorry.
So that was our deal, and the Saudi Arabians were happy. You know, shoot, they get the dollars. They keep the dollars. They invest a little bit in U.S. bonds, and the dollar remains strong. That was the basis of keeping the dollar strong right after 1971. Is in 1973. That's when it became the petrodollar. I'm sure you guys remember that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So what gave our
There's one other interesting tidbit I would like to just inject in here.
Sure.
And that is to answer the original question about when will we get rid of the central bank. Well, there are a lot of things we can do right now to end the central bank. Little things that we could do so that it doesn't affect us as much. For instance, cryptocurrencies present the greatest challenge to the global central banking system we've ever seen. It enables people who were in destitutely impoverished countries where the government makes gold illegal because they don't want you to be able to save in anything other than their own currency so they can tax it, because inflation is a tax on savings. Mm-hmm. It empowers the poorest in the world who have access to just a computer and the internet, which is about well over 2 billion people now, to simply memorize a sequence of words and have all of their wealth stored in their head and walk across borders taking everything with them. No banking regulation, no government saying you're not allowed to save in anything but our money. Just memorize a few words, send your savings there, and now you are wealthy no matter where you go. Bitcoin is accepted in basically every country, and there's no way they can stop you.
I don't want to go down too much of this path because I also have very much access to.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to do it because he doesn't agree with Bitcoin. That's the only. I'm going to call him out on his bullshit right now.
No, it's because I don't understand.
Because I have gotten into multiple. I've been in Bitcoin for a couple of years now, and I've got Coinbase. I've put money into it. This dude hates it. Just throwing it out there.
No. I never once said that I hated it. It's difficult to understand. And it's
What's
hard
to
for me-
understand? It's freedom. It's
hard-
fucking freedom. Brandon just said it, man. It's freedom. There are no regulations.
Okay.
Until now in America, they're putting regulations on Bitcoin.
Whenever you talk
Jesse's
about
done,
something
I have
being
something to
backed,
say about that,
whenever
Paul.
whenever you talk about like you want it to be backed by gold standard, I agree. I understand that. Cryptocurrency, there is still this unknowing thing for me, and maybe I just haven't put in the time and effort to really research it. There is so much confusion behind cryptocurrency to where I don't feel comfortable investing into something if I don't really understand the majority of it. And I don't understand the majority of cryptocurrency. I still don't understand what it's backed by. There is so much confusion there. I've watched documentaries. I've tried to do research. My mind it's so I love the idea of it. And I even like what really got me onto it is that mainstream media attacked it so hard. Mainstream media attacked it. They were like, man, this is how sex trafficking and oh man, this is how terrorists buy guns online. I'm like, and I'm hearing this from all these news media. I'm like, man, well, this is actually probably actually like there's some good here if they're really attacking it this hard because it's attacking them because that's for a separate conspiracy theory there. But I still, even after all that, it's hard for my mind to grasp the idea that is cryptocurrency. And if I'm going to put hard-earned money that I work very hard for into something, I need to know at least like 90% of it, the same way that I deal with the stock market. Like I need to know what I'm putting my money into and have like some foresight of, oh, this is what's going to happen over the next 5 years with this. Even though I've seen the trends of Bitcoin and I've seen it spike. It was like almost at $20,000 at one point per Bitcoin. I'm pretty sure that's almost where it peaked.
It's like 18,000 something. Basically.
Yeah, like something like that. Like I track cryptocurrency. I wanted to get into it. I could not. If I don't have enough knowledge on something, I cannot put my money into it until I fully understand it. And that was my biggest issue with cryptocurrency. Don't talk shit on me, Paul.
Let me.
Jesus Christ, that's what I've always said about it.
Okay, Brandon, go ahead. I've got all the answers too. I think you do as well.
Well, I believe firmly, as cryptocurrencies go, the one that is ultimately going to end or win is going to be the one that is backed by gold or silver. Cryptocurrencies are an accounting system, and I said they will set you free. One day, a country is going to back a cryptocurrency with gold or silver, and then no matter where you are in the world, you have claim to the amount of gold or silver inscribed, into the database, because that's all a cryptocurrency is. It's an accounting system, a distributed, trustless accounting system. An accounting system, I mean.
Okay, let me
But none of them are backed by gold or silver, though. But none of them currently right now are backed by gold or silver.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay.
What Brandon said is also correct.
That's like the dream, though.
What's that?
That's like the dream, though, to have a cryptocurrency backed by gold or silver. That sounds really good. If you had one like that, I would start putting money into it fucking right now. If I knew that and I had proof of that right in front of my face, I would do that.
I'll tell you what. Rather than changing the kind of what we were going to do tonight, let's do our next podcast on cryptocurrencies and explaining them, how they work, why they are such a wonderful thing. But Brandon's right. Eventually, one of these cryptos will be backed by gold, and it will be the winner instantaneously overnight. Whoever has the gold to actually back a crypto will win. And unfortunately, it'll probably be something like FedCoin. But it will be the winner. Whatever one it is.
There's FedCoin. FedCoin is cryptocurrency right now. There's something called FedCoin.
No, it's not. It's
okay. So this hypothetical.
Saying a general statement of what it would be.
Okay.
Yep. So, but Brandon is correct. But rather than changing the subject or the tempo of the conversation, let me just say this: that cryptocurrency definitely has the ability to topple literally central banks. It absolutely does. It is the best bet we have. All we have to do is start using it. We as the people can make a choice right now to stop using dollars and start using Bitcoin or Monero or Litecoin. I mean, pick your poison. There's a lot of them, preferably something in the top 20 that has a real chance. And then eventually someone will adopt it and back it with gold. Let's hope it's not a government. Let's hope it's not a government.
That
So go
that
ahead.
was the one thing I was going to say. And I know we're trying to avoid this subject and save this, which, by the way, great topic for a future podcast, because there are some people out there interested in crypto and the topic in general. Maybe not interested in investing in it, but the topic in general. I definitely think that we should bring this up in the future. I real quick wanted to say, oh man, now I'm drawing a blank. I've been thinking about it so long. I think the biggest thing with it right now is that, like you said, I love the idea behind it, because basically what it is anonymous currency. It is and I feel like, Brandon, and you might have to correct me on this, you said untrusted, when I feel like it is actually the opposite. I feel like it's the most trusted, because the ledger is
Trustless.
yeah, well, okay,
Trustless
sorry, you said trustless.
Is what yeah.
And maybe I'm just mixing up the correct words
In
here.
other words, there's no third party.
Okay, that makes sense then. Because I was going to say, I
okay.
feel like it's one of the most trusted ones,
Yeah.
because every single person who owns some or whatever, if you're using Bitcoin, you are also keeping track of the ledger at the exact same time, which is why it is so trusted in my eyes, is because everybody when I make a transaction with you, like, you're keeping track of that ledger. It's like everybody's got receipts on every transaction possible, constantly, except that you can't specifically track that receipt to an individual, and therefore it's anonymous at the same time.
That's correct.
So the ledger and the accounting is always correct, but you can't trace it to an individual and know what they purchased. You just know that the numbers are right.
It's like cash. It's like cash.
This is okay. Would you consider this almost polar opposite to the Federal Reserve and how our monetary system is?
Yes,
it is polar opposite.
Let me tell you why. Guys, I think I've mentioned this to you before in previous podcasts. There's large speculation that the Federal Reserve has a second balance sheet. A balance sheet that is not public. It's private. They've acknowledged its existence, but they won't say how much is on it. Catherine Austin Fitts has figured it out. It's approximately between 21 and 25 trillion dollars. This is money that they printed without creating any associated bonds. We don't even know what the hell the Federal Reserve is doing. We can't even audit them. Remember I was talking about we can't audit the gold since 1953? We can't audit the Federal Reserve either.
I love that, by the way. The government doesn't want to be audited? No fucking way.
They'll audit the shit out of me, though.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. They will audit the feces out of you, Jesse, and then they'll do it again the next year.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. That's true.
Yeah,
Now,
but you can't audit them. No way.
no, I don't even want to go down that road. I'll let somebody else talk.
Okay, Brandon,
I gotta go
come
take
on
a
in,
piss.
buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have some thoughts?
What's the first step? Okay, so after the first steps are taken, what is the world like without the Federal Reserve? I mean, I know we've talked a little bit, or probably a lot of the majority of this podcast, but what is the overarching theme of what a world would be like without a Federal Reserve?
Okay, actually,
Well,
Brandon, you
I
take
have
this and I'll come in at the end. Go ahead.
Yeah, before we started the podcast, I wrote down a whole list of statistics of what basically the central bank has done and all the trends that would begin to reverse if we didn't have them any longer. One of them is that after 1971 and we went to a purely fiat system, marriages started ending in divorce more often, especially among older people. That would be one of the things that would go away, strangely, because when you make people work 2 full-time jobs each in a marriage, they come home angry at each other, and it's not a surprise they get divorced all the time. The top 1%, you probably have heard the whole wealth and income inequality thing. Well, without money being printed endlessly and given to their buddies picking winners in the economy, you wouldn't have this exploding 1% owning so much. During 2008, I'll give you an instance. They printed up a bunch of money and gave it to the banks to bail them out after the housing collapse. What the government did is they printed up a bunch of money and bought the banks a bunch of houses that they then sold back to us. So the government bought them the house, then they sell us the house the government bought us to it, and they got to win twice on that deal. Stuff like that would go away.
Yep.
Let's see.
So,
And
everything you've
What
said
I'd-
is a quality of life improvement for. You're saying an overall
Yes,
quality of
yes.
life improvement for
Okay.
99% of people, which is, I'm not for it. I say keep the Federal Reserve. Fuck that. No,
let me,
obviously
let
get
me
rid of
be
it.
more specific. Let me be more specific. Brandon can bring up lots of stats, and he's got them. I mean, this guy is sharp. But let me tell you what would be. I'm at the brass tacks here. Number one, you'd make more money relative to your currency. Number two, you can save more money relative to your currency. Number three, all items and goods and services are cheaper relative to your currency. That's what happens if you get rid of the Federal Reserve or central bank. Period. Because they can't.
Another
print
one
and-
is
Go ahead, Brendan.
one other scary statistic is since 1971, despite violent crime continuing its trend from the 1800s of just going down, starting in 1971, the moment we went to a fiat money system, we started the war on drugs and imprisoned a record number of people. Especially in the United States, we have more people in jail or prison than even North Korea, the single most dictatorial state in the world.
I knew North Korea was doing something right.
I'm pretty sure this is an old stat, but the United States holds right around 1% of the world's overall population, and then right around a quarter, 25% of imprisoned population.
We have the most imprisonment per capita.
Yeah, like
Yes, we do.
by a lot. It's
far.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
We also have privatized prisons.
You also
Hey,
would get
Man, that could be a whole nother podcast on that one. That infuriates me, the idea of privatized prisons and the fact that people make money off.
of
Nah, I don't even wanna
literally
get into it. I don't
getting
even
rid
wanna
of
get
other
into it.
people's freedoms. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Anyways.
even get into it. You know
But
how I believe on that.
let's look at healthcare for a second. The cost of healthcare shooting out of reach for Paul, for Jesse, and for John, because we have a Federal Reserve that won't stop printing dang money. Or I'm sorry, currency. It's not money, it's currency. They won't stop printing it. And therefore, Paul, you may not be able to get that life-saving surgery that you need if you don't have insurance and take out a mortgage to pay out your deductible or your premium or whatever. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that where having a central bank actually detracts from our quality of life and makes it tougher for us to raise families. It makes us tougher as a society to feed the people. I mean, central banks are the enemy. They are the enemy. They always have been.
Pat, I'm pretty sure you've seen the stat of the difference over the past like 50 years of the lowest paid employee to the CEO of companies,
I have.
and the ridiculous increase in that, and just I think that comes down to a distribution of wealth, but I think this also is a very key thing whenever you talk about the Federal Reserve and just how everything is working right now. But
So how does the
Well,
how does the gold standard affect like the most elite people? How does it affect
Well,
them?
That comes down to free market, which we don't have. Now, I know that Jesse said earlier that we still have vestiges of free market. I'm looking at it in my rearview mirror. It's gone. It's been gone for quite some time now. So
Agree.
if we have a honest monetary system, we will have free markets. It's guaranteed. One follows the other. It's a hand in a glove. But you also have to have audits of your gold. I mean, this is critical. If we go back on a gold standard and if we're not auditing our gold, we'll be right back in the same, swamp that we were in by having a Federal Reserve or a central bank in the first place.
does that come down to holding a higher standard to people in political power?
Well, not necessarily. I think that there should be allowances for private companies to come in and audit. I don't trust politicians, gang. I mean, local politicians, their feet are in the fire constantly. They're living amongst us. They're not living in their high palaces like the Washington folks are. But I think you take my meaning on that.
Mhm.
I still wouldn't trust senators and Congress, at Washington, D.C. to keep the money supply honest. I wouldn't.
Oh,
We
of
would
course.
have to have some kind of disinterested third party coming in, maybe from another country, whatever, just to come in and audit.
Could you imagine the United States allowing someone from another country to come in and audit that? You know how ridiculous. Even though that sounds great, you know that will never fucking happen. That our sense of pride and who we are would never,
But
not
it
even
ha-
a pride thing.
but it has
It's just
to.
all the dark shit that we have, all the dark, nitty-gritty shit that our federal government doesn't want found out. Like having a third party come in and audit them. No, they'll be dead. No, the plane will crash on the way. By the way, on the way from whatever country they're coming from. Oh, that's weird. That plane crashed. Don't know how that happened.
But you're talking about
that's what would happen.
You're talking about the money system, though. Legitimately, I get what you're saying, Pat. Like, they come in, they just audit the actual gold that we have or any country has, and they're all set. Whatever it may be, it has to happen. It has to happen. Look where we are at right now. It is absolutely undeniably unfair for so many people that something has to give and something has to change. And this podcast and what we've talked about, I think, is a step in the right direction to change something. We're not asking for a utopia in any way, shape, or form. We're asking for affordable health care. And you know what? Every 4 years, we are promised that we're going to get affordable health care or universal health care or everyone's going to get school for free. Well, you know what?
If you're still listening to promises of presidents,
exactly,
that's an issue.
Exactly. Nothing has fucking changed. And you know what? Pat and Brandon, what you guys are talking about is change. Some serious change. Some huge implications on everyone's lives that could potentially make it at least manageable, at least to where we can go back and like it was in the 60s and 70s to where I could work, pay for myself to get school, pay for decent health care for my whole family, and it's chill. You're not going into debt. Everything is fine.
Wouldn't it be nice just to be able to own some land?
That
right?
too.
And,
that
like,
too.
And
that
actually,
too.
I mean, actually own some land.
Well, there's taxes, so you mean rent.
No, that's all it is. We don't really own anything.
That's my next big.
I don't
Jesse,
own my car.
Whenever I retire, that is what I'm going to do with my time. I am going to start some sort of organization to start putting pressure on governments to stop property taxes. It must end.
Absurd. Like I said, flat rate tax is the way to do it. In my opinion, I'm no fucking genius. I'm random asshole 29-year-old right now.
Yeah.
But
well, and people say, "Hey, you hate the schools. You hate the school." Well, as a matter of fact, I do. But just get the money someplace else for supporting the school system. Don't take it from, if I don't want to support the school system, I have to. And if I choose not to, they take away my land. They take away my home. I mean, that's insane. That is not, we talked about free markets. They don't exist. That's an example.
The school argument is so absurd anyways, because you can take that from anywhere. Getting rid of property taxes does not get rid of supporting schools. You literally just move stuff around. That's why I've said before, and I don't want to get into a huge tax conversation because I like how we are keeping this contained to the Federal Reserve and banks and loans and everything else. But the whole tax situation, I've still yet to hear a rebuttal to the just flat rate sales tax. Yes, it would be ridiculous. I said 30%. It'd probably be way more than that. It'd probably be like 80%, something crazy. They did the math on it a while back, and it's somewhere between 30 and 80. It's super high. But you get all of your income. What you make, you make. You make every bit of it. The government doesn't take a dime. What you own it. You don't rent it. You don't rent your car from the government by paying property tax every year. You don't rent your land or your house by paying property tax every year. You own it. When you pay for anything, you pay taxes. Anything you buy. And then it hits everybody. When a billionaire buys a jet, they pay more taxes than you because that jet costs more than anything you're paying. It's still the same percentage, but they're putting more back into the tax economy. When the hooker down the street who doesn't have a real job, who gets paid under the table, who doesn't pay income tax, buys orange juice for her kids, she's paying taxes. The same percentage that the billionaire's paying. Everybody puts back into the economy equivalent to what they are making. And I haven't heard an argument against it.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I just got one thing to say. Just with the public school thing, since I just want to throw my few cents in there. The bureaucracy is where most of the money in the public schools go. As a matter of fact, the public schools are so outrageously expensive. We spend more in the United States than any country has ever spent in the entire history of the entire world.
And we have some of the dumbest kids in the world, too, by the way.
And literacy has gone down since 500 years ago in the medieval ages when they didn't have public schools at all. Literacy is going down to where it was, not only before public schools, but even that brief period after the printing press came into existence. It's just people were more literate after the invention of the printing press than they are today with public schools. But not only that, they are so outrageously expensive, it would be cheaper to buy every kid a laptop, pay for their entire internet connection for a year, give them a tutor, not, oh, yeah, you know what I mean, online school, and pay for a babysitter. And then for the ones who are specially challenged, it would be cheaper to give them their own individual tutor with all of this other stuff going on at the same time and deliver the kids meals to their home every single day. It would still be less than half of what we're currently paying.
Which is, man, we're getting into, that's absurd. We're getting into so many subjects here that all, like, they kind of intertwine. Like, we're talking about education. We talked about taxes. We talked about stock market, everything, the Federal Reserve. They're all intertwining and they're real close. So I'm not trying to branch off too much.
I want to hear more about the prostitute that cares enough about her kids to buy them orange juice.
Hey, well, prostitutes got, hey, you never heard of the whore with the golden heart? You never heard of the, what is it, the hooker with the golden heart, the whore with the golden heart?
That must be a golden book. I must have missed that one.
Yeah,
when I was a kid.
it's a picture book. It's colored by numbers, but it's a good one.
Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just curious on if we were to go back to a gold standard, we're still currently, still mining for gold and stuff like that. I'm just curious if there's an estimate on how much gold there actually is that's present on Earth. That would affect the economy and make it fluctuate, and
There is more gold in the earth. I don't know the numbers. I do know this. There is less silver above ground than there is gold. Silver technically should be worth more than gold right now. I know this is going to sound really strange, especially to John Q. Citizen, who thinks, well, gosh, gold is the end-all be-all. There's actually rarer metals than gold, actually, but none of them have been considered money before. So silver is probably not as good a use because we need it so badly in industry for money. Gold would be it. And now we hear Donald Trump talking about possibility of using Space Force to mine asteroids for gold. And by the way, I'm not making it up. That's actually in an article I read a while back, maybe a week or two ago. I don't know how much there is in the crust. Brandon, maybe you know or have read something on that. I have read stuff on this before, but I just don't remember. Brandon?
Oh, there isn't very much. And gold gets mined at a rate of about 2% per year, which also kind of happens to be the rate of population growth. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's not really increasing all that much. And fun fact, if you look at the Gold and We Trust report, the last page gives you how much an ounce of gold will buy you in beer at Oktoberfest. And it has been more stable.
We're talking important numbers now, people. Pay attention. You've got me. Keep
undivided attention right now.
In 1980, it bought you a peak of 122 ounces of beer in Oktoberfest. At its bottom, it was about 66 ounces in 1971, right before we went off the gold standard. In ounces.
Oh, in ounces, okay.
It really doesn't fluctuate as much. I mean, that's only about 50% from the mean. You look at the U.S. dollar, and in 1913 at Oktoberfest, $1 would buy you a whole bunch of these. Like each penny would get you another ounce, if not more. And then by now, that same dollar doesn't even get you a single ounce of beer at Oktoberfest.
Man,
this is
I wish I was in 1970 Germany right now. I don't want to go way farther back. Like 1940 gets a little iffy, but 1970 Germany, I will take.
Whenever you're talking about, what was it, Space Force or whatever? Always in mining gold from asteroids. I always think of No Man's Sky, which is a video game. I don't know if anybody. I know Johnny knows No Man's Sky, but that's what I think of because you mine asteroids in that game and you can get like gold, silver, and platinum. Anyway, my bad.
Understood.
Not reference No Man's Sky again. Great video game, by the way.
I real quick had a question that's related to banks, the Federal Reserve, loans, all of that in general, and this is very much a hypothetical, and I asked just to take a couple of seconds to think about it because what I'm about to ask I don't think will ever happen. I think it is more likely that the Federal Reserve ends completely, not just absorbed, but I mean completely ends before this ever happens. But in general, if you were to completely worldwide, hypothetically, get rid of loans, because I feel like a lot of the problems we have come from loans. You talk about the 2008 financial crisis, the housing crisis, all these things. You even brought up this previous September 2019, these $350 billion loans to banks and stuff like that. And I mean, even when we talk about just loans and interest and all this in general, when you get rid of loans or get rid of interest completely, and what exists, exists, and what you have is what you have, and you fair trade everything. If I own a farm and I own cows and they make milk, and then I give you a certain amount of milk, or I trade that for currency, and then I give that currency to you so that you fix my car, whatever, with no loans existing at all, is that a positive or I know it'll never happen, but is that a positive or a negative with loans just not being a thing?
That actually is a very interesting one. And actually, if you go back to the Old Testament, that was called a debt jubilee. And it happened, it was at every 50 years. Anyone who had any outstanding debt, it was forgiven. And what people had, they had. This doesn't happen in today's culture. That was something that was specific to the Jewish culture. However, it's been talked about. But unfortunately, it's been talked about this way. You guys will love this one. If there were to be a debt jubilee because of the sheer money printing and valueless currency we currently have, the debt jubilee would belong to governments and banks only, not to us.
Well,
what they do is take us to a new money standard and then convert what our debt was from the old standard into the new standard and then start billing us again.
Yeah, I mean,
so
like I said, that's why it's a hypothetical. You'll never get rid of that situation. I'm just curious as to where, like, because once again, the same with what I said about taxes earlier. I feel like if you completely defeat loans, like you can't, and people are like, well, how am I supposed to afford a house? Well, think about it for a couple of seconds here. If loans don't exist at all, nobody can borrow money from anybody else.
Yep.
Then houses are not $150,000.
That's correct.
Houses are affordable.
Yep.
And everything's affordable, and everybody makes money equivalent to the amount of work put in.
Correct. Labor has a defined value at that point in gold. Go ahead, Brandon.
I was just going to get at the not having any loans would kind of be somewhat of a negative. If you have a really good idea and you find somebody who has lots of money who recognizes you have a good idea and they calculate the risks and how much that money is worth, them not being able to spend it for a period of time is what they would charge for interest. And they'd factor in other things, not only risk, but, you know, if the currency is getting more valuable every year, like under a gold standard, you'd get an even lower rate. And the only amount you could borrow is the amount somebody was willing to give you to take. They can't just run it off the printing press and just give it to whoever they want. It's whoever you can convince that whatever it is you want to buy or do is worthy of said money.
I understand. I get what you're saying there. I'm going to rebuttal a little bit with the fact that as far as you were talking about, if I have a really good idea, someone else has a lot of money, but I can't get loans because loans don't exist. At that point, don't you have a form of just investment then, which is your whole risk versus reward thing, which is them saying, I have a lot of money. I believe in your idea. I believe it's good. They take the risk of investing in my company, and they own a certain percentage of that, of all income I make in the future on that company. But that's not a loan. They're taking that risk. They are giving me that money for a percentage of the company. And if that company fails, they're shit out of luck. They made a bad risk, or they made a bad investment. If they win and my idea is good, then they make money off of that, and I make money off of that. And then you have free market even with ideas and investment, because some person could come up to me and say, like, I'm willing to give you $100,000 for 50%. And I'm like, no, because this person's going to do $200,000 for only 25%. When there's still no loans involved.
Yeah, that's truly libertarianism right there. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I'm just saying that's a little bit like an income sharing agreement, which they do have in some schools. We had a friend named Craig. He just joined a crypto school where they teach you how to create cryptocurrencies and everything else. And they pay for your education. And in return, you give them a percentage of your money over so many years, if you make any money at all. if whatever they taught you wasn't valuable, you owe them nothing if you can't get employed with their skills. And they only take that percentage if you make over a certain amount. So they guarantee you minimum amounts of how much income you could make with the education that they are giving you, and only charging you when you go beyond a certain level. So you have a safety net. And if you don't make that amount of money, the bill goes away.
Well, I think it comes down to, especially with John's point, which I will say again was a very strong libertarian point, so I liked it, is mitigating the risks and pitfalls of all kinds of problems with loans with a currency that is created out of the thin air. If money, in fact, has value, people will take great care what they do with it. That idea must be very good before I'm going to give that guy 1,000 ounces of gold to get that idea off the ground.
True. And that's what Brandon said earlier, too, as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, once again, it's about preventing malinvestment. With this creature from Jekyll Island, I want to plug the book one more time, G. Edward Griffin. You guys can find this on Amazon. It's a great book. It's a 5th edition. With money printed out of nothing, there is no better breeding ground for malinvestment. When you have money printed out of nothing, it has no value. They can print it up ad nauseum. You can get loans from the bank for stupid things and dumb ideas. But if money was real, if it was real and it had value, this malinvestment would take, it would take a different form, and it would be very, very, very small compared to the sheer quantity of malinvestment we have in our system right now.
I guess you're right, and I didn't think of it that way, where it's like, if you completely defeat the Federal Reserve, like you guys said, then loans are okay because you don't have malinvestment and because you have people actually interested in investing their money wisely, because money is not made out of thin air. So then you don't run into the 2008 financial crisis of people, literally banks being like, you know what, I'm going to give money to everybody. Everybody can buy a house. None of them can afford to pay me back. I'm going to make a ton off the interest, and then when I'm like, oh man, wow, everybody went bankrupt, including myself, no big deal. The government will print more money and then give me that money. And then I'll pay my CEOs with bonuses, which is exactly what happened in 2008.
It's happening now. It's happening now, too, but...
I don't know.
And Brandon, you had another point you wanted to bring up, Brandon.
Well, it's what an investment is and what malinvestment is what profit is you take something of lower value, say a bunch of wood, and you turn it into something of higher value, either by adding time or whatever. So you take this wood and you turn it into a bookcase, and you're able to get somebody to pay more for the bookcase than the amount the wood was worth. Whoever buys it valued your bookcase more than their money, and the excess, or the difference between the cost and the product, is the amount of money you make. It's the profit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good investment when that number is positive. When you take a bunch of resources and you lose money on them, that would be a malinvestment. Which, when you have a bunch of people who can make money out of nothing and just hand it to companies like Twitter, who've never made any money whatsoever, and they take $100 billion and they lose it all, and they get another $100 billion and they lose it all again, and they get another $50 billion and they lose it again, and they create nothing of value. If you were an investor and money had value and it had to come from somewhere and you had to earn it, either by adding value, by making something, or getting resources and tasking other people who have the skills to make something more valuable. And then at every step of the way, we all get richer by giving society something of greater value than we started with. Rather than printing all this money, taxing everybody's savings, because that's what inflation is, and making everybody poorer by taking all these resources, all these computers, and all this human capital they have there, all the people who are working, who could be in more productive things, adding value, making everybody better off, giving them stuff, transforming less valuable things into more valuable things. In a free market, you would have a little bit of people screwing up, taking wood, making a bookcase that nobody wants, but they go out of business very quickly because no one is willing to give up all of their earned money to keep supporting something that just goes through and losing money. And if they do, well, they had to add value to lose value. So it balances out.
I mean, it sounds like you're just describing free market, to be honest. Unless I missed something.
Yes.
Yeah, that's literal free market at that point.
Which we don't have anymore.
No, not at all.
The free market's gone. Capitalism died a long, long time ago. And I know that they're going to blame capitalism for this collapse. But we have crony capitalism. We have fascism. We have the opposite. But if we had honest money, capitalism would reign supreme. It would.
Capitalism works.
Yes, it does.
I say it all the time on this podcast. Capitalism works, but we're no longer dealing with capitalism. It is evolved so far past that. It's you
and
can't
what
even
killed capitalism
to call
is
this
central banking.
To call
Central
this
banking.
a capitalist nation is laughable. Laughable in my opinion. You're not even looking at it. If you're saying, "Oh, this is United States capitalism." No. Capitalism is gone. It's gone. It's gone. It's so frustrating for me. One thing I want to reiterate, because I think it was one of the most important things that anybody could. Brandon brought it up earlier, and I just want to reiterate it real quick. He talked about, because I'm all about the tangible things that you can look at as far as history. Not so much conspiracy theory, but the tangible things you can look at. Brandon brought up, you can literally look at this trend that happened throughout time to where there was this peak, like betterment of human life, this affordability, everything you could do, and then now it's regressing. We're in this regression. I just wanted to almost bring that. I might be a little
good.
off there.
No,
I
right.
wanted to bring this back up because Brandon, in my opinion, brought up the most important part of this whole podcast, because this is a tangible thing throughout history that's unarguable. It's unarguable. You can look at this. The cost of living, everything was really good, and it peaked up until the gold standard went away, and then all we've done is seen this regression. If you could simplify this whole podcast in one general idea, it's what Brandon brought up probably like 45 minutes ago, and it's that, and we are not on any track to where, oh, it's just trending down and it's going to spike. No, this is a trending down thing that we're dealing with. And I think if you could simplify it in the best way, it's what Brandon talked about.
And exactly what Brandon talked about, eventually it's going to continue to go like that, what you just said, until there's a breaking point. And when there's a breaking point, I think that's when you're going to see something change, like the Federal Reserve maybe being absorbed or eventually taken away completely, or something has to give at that point. But yeah, I agree.
Because that's tangible history. It's unarguable history. There's no arguing that. That the history is so well written, you can't argue that. So this is, you can speculate against the future and changing all that, but the one thing we know is that, man, there was this peak point in time when people were doing really well, and then when did shit start to all of a sudden now, like the way that he put it, like one person in the household was able to afford the house and all this, and people go to school and be able to afford it, and it's just been trending downward, and it's only going to get worse. But so that's I thought that was almost the highlight of the podcast, what Brandon brought up, but because that's such a tangible thing that anybody can grasp there, and the way that he put it was phenomenal. But
he's well spoken, and I'll tell you, these expansions and contractions are nothing more than symptoms of monetary policy controlled by a central bank. We don't have to have recessions, but we do because we have a central bank. These expansions are when, there's
Wait,
lots
let
of...
me...
Go ahead, Brandon.
The expansions would be, when times are good. When you don't have a war, or you don't have a meteor taking out a country, or something of that nature. You just have your life getting better year over year. With better statistics and data, I wish I could source the chart on this one. It's been a while, but it was found that there was a 20-year period between central banks where the money supply was shrinking year over year, and the economy grew every year by about an average of 4% per year. And that means that your quality of life doubled in that 20-year period without any regression. And then introduced another central bank, they devalued the currency greatly, and we lost a lot of that very quickly.
For sure. And I don't want to cut this short, man, but we've got a lot of information within this podcast. We
Yeah.
truly have, and we're close to 2 hours.
Yeah, I don't want.
Are
I don't
you
want to.
serious right now?
Yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
we're only 45 minutes in.
Nah, we are.
Oh no,
good.
it's like an hour and a half. Sorry, because we did start at it was like probably like 9:40. But
Oh man, I could do
9:40,
this for another
9:45.
5 hours.
No, this is good though because we can have you guys both back on in the future and talk about. I mean, like I said, we've brought up a lot tonight: education, crypto,
yeah,
banks, loans. I mean, so much that's really important stuff. But I don't want to stretch this one out to a
Yeah.
point to where it defeats the purpose.
Yep. And first of all, thank you for having us back. It's always an honor to be on your podcast. And I'm going to do another shameless plug
Go for it.
The
Do it.
Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And it's available on Amazon. And I believe the price is, it's right around $30. You might be able to find a used copy. It is an incredible education on everything that was done totally illegally to create our central bank. It's all in there. It's extremely well documented. So if you ever wanted, okay, we just talked about why the central bank is bad, but this book covers how it was created in the first place against the will of the people. So it's a very important book. So I just wanted to plug it one more time.
And Pat gets 80% of all proceeds towards that book.
I get nothing. I get nothing.
Yeah.
But it's a great education is what it is.
well,
The origin is extremely important too,
Yeah.
because in history you can't just have the end result. You need all three acts basically, like with anything, and I think that's like probably act one. So it's hard to understand what we were talking about in this without a little bit of the origin, which you did bring up a little bit, but maybe we need to do a podcast that's more thorough on the origins of why things got all fucky.
Yeah, it was
Things get
we.
fucky.
I think we've actually Pat's mentioned it in a previous podcast. Honestly, about the secrecy of that meeting that happened in Jekyll Island, because I've watched plenty of documentaries on it. I don't remember much about it, but the most important part that holds true is the meeting itself. But yeah, we'll check that book out for sure, Pat.
And it certainly had to be secret because it was the biggest screw job ever handed to the American people, where they literally put in a central bank to ensure that literally the bankers and the 0.1% would accumulate all the wealth within 100 years in our nation. That's what they did by putting in a central bank.
And people can call that conspiracy, but look where we're at, and look at this. Look at what we just talked about in this podcast, and the discrepancy of the what life is like for them and what life is like for us.
Brandon
You know
brought
what
up the
I'm saying?
numbers, and you can
No,
look it up for yourself.
It's literally
Stats don't lie.
irrefutable. What Brandon said historically, you can literally chart it.
Right.
What he said, very articulately. It's unavoidable to see this where it peaked and now it's dropping. It's
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
You can't
Right.
argue.
No.
In my opinion, you can't argue.
Even if
what
you're
Brandon-
lazy and don't want to look up the stats, look anecdotally. Talk to your grandparents and see how their life was compared to yours.
Yes.
See what
Right.
Absolutely, there are people still around who can attest to this. It's not some ancient history here. This is very recent. Everything that's happening. So
Well, thank you, Pat, and thank you, Brandon.
I
for
just want
Go ahead, Brandon.
to throw a plug out there. The place where you could just see the aggregate of the charts if you wished is WTF happened in 1971. You can throw that into a search
.com.
engine and find everything I talked about.
I'll put that.
Yeah,
Put that in the description for sure. WTF happened in 1971.com. I will put that in the description. Also, I mean, it's great having you guys. Great having you back on, Pat. Great having you for the first time, Brandon. Did you want to also mention, truth, money, freedom is
Yeah.
where you can find.
Yeah. Brandon was with us last time too, but you guys weren't available because of the COVID lockdown.
Sorry about that. I did not realize that was the one that we missed.
yeah.
Yep. So Brandon and I are members of a Discord group called Truth, Money, and Freedom. And we'll go ahead and if you link up our channel on this, if you look in the description section of any of our videos, you'll find a link to our Discord group. We have a very active voice chat, a very active community, a lot of smart people. I'm probably one of the dumbest of them. I'm just probably the one with the loudest voice. And we talk about such things. We figure we're kind of like a brain trust there. We try and figure out the future of finance based on what's happening in politics. And also as an aggregate, we're everything from anarchists to libertarians. You won't find a whole lot of Republicans or Democrats among us, even though they're very much welcome. So we try to look at things as objectively as possible. And that's where Brandon and I come from, is from Truth, Money, and Freedom podcast.
Hell yes.
Hell yes, bro.
Hell yeah! Why'd you going southern real quick?
I'm just saying,
And-
man.
and-
yeah.
I would like to extend something very special. If next time we do a podcast, if you guys would like to join us in our Discord group and do the podcast from within there, I would be happy to record it, so we could actually have it that way. But that way we can have live questions and answer sessions with people within our group. Now, it won't be vocal, it will be text, but we can read them as they're coming in because they'll be able to hear us while we're having our podcast
That'd
live.
be amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
and I don't know if this would change, but if we were able to go do a live podcast and Talk Junkies, we could still do both. But if we were able to go live on Talk Junkies, that would help that as well. Correct?
Okay, yep, that's
Yeah,
correct.
we could have
Okay.
you could-
simultaneous.
Yeah, and we're
I've done
working
it,
on that. But
live
if
in Discord and live on YouTube at the same time.
awesome, yeah, that would be
So
awesome.
I've been able to achieve that, so I can help you with the technicals. But you guys are always welcome to come and join us in our Discord group. I think you guys would find it very interesting.
Thanks, Pat.
Awesome. All love, man. All love.
Always. Brandon, thank you, man. Any lasting thoughts, Brandon?
Well, that is everything I have for you today.
There you go. And you had the best. I think the most honestly important thing was what you said about that whole thing. It'll be the fourth time that I bring it up, so I won't even bring it up again. But I thought what you brought to the table was extremely important, very tangible, historical way to look at where things were and now where we are.
I think
now.
what you're trying to say is
But,
anyone could look at what
Yes,
Brandon
yes.
said,
I
and it
think-
would
yes.
make sense.
Yes,
It would make complete
That's what I'm
sense.
saying. Yes, that's what I'm
Thank
saying.
See where
you.
I bring them along now, guys?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
I agree that Brandon said the most important thing, but I think it's the fact that Twitter doesn't make any money.
Yeah.
What?
That was a shocker.
What?
What happened there?
Yeah. Okay.
And let's us forget. We forget here that prostitutes buy orange juice for their kids.
They do.
Yes, yes.
They do.
Every now and again.
You got to.
I believe this is the second time I brought it up.
I didn't say
apologize.
toothpaste. I said orange juice.
You did. You did.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Pat and Brandon with Truth, Money, Freedom joining Talk Junkies for another time and another great podcast. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. God bless you guys.
You too.
All love, man.
And there you have it, man.
I'm amazed you didn't delete the whole podcast.
Yeah,
That's
just right now.
You closed it out, just deleted all the audio, all the video.
Oh man, that was just Skype, bro. That was just Skype. But there you have it, man. Pat and Brandon with Truth, Money, Freedom podcast. It's always a great time to have them on the show. I think it was a very
My bad for not knowing Brandon was on before. That was my fault.
Well, we weren't here.
I know.
Is what? Yeah.
I mentioned it, but that's neither here nor there. But the best thing that you guys can do, obviously, is share this video, like this video, and even just watch this video. Honestly, at this point, just watching it would help us. And Talk Junkies, we're trying to give you diligent information, great information.
If it
You
gets
know what
some
I'm
gears
saying?
turning,
Right.
some thing you've never thought about, maybe you're thinking about it, and maybe you could be like, man, fuck these guys. They don't even know what the fuck they're talking about. But at least you had to think about something for a little bit.
I love how 2 minutes from the end of the podcast you say, you should probably watch this. Like,
Right.
that's what would help.
But also comment that also helps. I will not reply to bots anymore. Johnny told me about that, so I won't do that anymore, man. I didn't. If you were to look at these, you wouldn't have known they were bots either. I'm just saying.
Yes, I would have.
No, you wouldn't.
I was on Tinder a lot. I know what bots are.
Well,
bro.
I've never been on Tinder. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Talk Junkies. Thanks for watching Truth, Money, Freedom podcast. Hit that like button. Hit that bell notification. Hit the subscribe button to all our junkies out there.
Stay fly and ring the bell. Richard Nixon.
Not a criminal.
Nixon.